Gentlemen, ladies, and anyone in between, I welcome you all, and today, just as promised in my initial teardown video, I'm going to go over each individual component from left to right, and we're going to go over just why I think this is the most impressive spinning reel to hit the market in 2020, or in quite some time, even despite some of the issues I came across. Usually I'm pretty tough on a reel. If I have a reel that has a defect out of the box, whether it's quality control, design, it could be a bad part, I'm very critical as how it left the factory that way. And I am not happy with some of the issues that I've experienced, but they all seem to be simple fixes in a reel that is one of the most brilliantly designed that I've ever come across. That includes Z-Bass, Van Staal VR, Penn Torque, Stella, Twin Power, Saltiga, you name it. This is a real contender, pardon the pun, in the world of super spinners, and this may shake up the industry in terms of what surf reel you want to swim out to a rock in Montauk, get beaten on in Block Island, or just wade the flats, a couple hundred yards off when you go waist deep and not worry about a thing. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started from left to right. I'm going to do my best to keep it in that order. We're going to start with the handle assembly, and just marvel at this heavy gauge machined aluminum, big heavy bolt, high grade stainless, and it's configured for left or right hand retrieve out of the box, which can't claim to be the case with the Van Staal VR or VS series or even Z-Bass reels. So the only real super sealed spinner that you can switch left and right hand to be considered somewhat ambidextrous is the Saltex and the Penn Torque. And at the same time, there's a difference between true ambidextrous. So if you go with a bailless option, is the pickup facing the way the rotor's turning, whether you're cranking the handle on the left or the right hand side. When you crank it on this side here, the rotor turns this way, and you just grab the line with your finger and it'll catch it and put it on the line roller. Whereas when it's an ambidextrous reel, the rotation of the rotor is still the same. You go to catch the line with your finger, it's not going to catch on the line roller. So that's really the only downfall of truly ambidextrous reels. The rotation stays the same on the rotor. So, great handle on this. Handle knob. If you were to take a wiffle ball and throw a curveball, you're digging your fingers into these identically shaped, identically milled cutouts. I would have liked to see something a little different here. I'm not a big fan of this design. I put silicone tape on it when I was fishing it just to keep my fingers from digging in. It's just uncomfortable for me. Now, you guys, your mileage may vary. I just wasn't a big fan. I am, however, a big fan of how the handle assembly is put together, even though mine had a defective ball bearing, super crunchy, super crackly. That's a simple fix. I have some DuPont Vespel journal bearings being machined up for me by my buddy Ernie at Bearing Bad Tool, just to get rid of the bearings here. It's going to do some super low coefficient of friction bushings at that location. Totally overkill, but it's going to be fun. So you have the stainless shaft that is fit to the handle. You can see how hard it is to get it in there, right? The machining tolerances are absolutely ridiculous. There's also going to be a screw that keeps it in place. You probably don't even need that screw. That's how securely this stainless steel piece, let me see if I can press it in there. Got to bang it on my table against some wood just to get it to seat all the way. Then there's that screw that goes in there. You then have a bearing that goes down here, the knob that gets seated over that, another bearing goes on top there, probably missed, the screw, and then you have the little rubber cap. That's going to seal off the top end, and then this goes, there's an O-ring there. See the little rubber O-ring? That just keeps that, you don't want to cut the O-ring. Almost had a whoopsie. We're not reassembling this reel, so we'll just leave it as is. But if you notice down here, there's another little O-ring at the base. Let me see if I can get that to focus. That O-ring is going to ride against the base of the handle knob to prevent water, grit, and sand from getting up inside here. So ball bearings are safe in there. Safer than what you'll find on the Saltiga handle knob, at least the last generation. I haven't seen the new one. I had some corrosion issues at the handle knob bearings there. So if you put a bushing there, if you have a bearing there, if you have a greased bushing, if you have lubricant in there, it's going to stay inside and perform for a long time, provided you don't get a defect like me. So, moving along, get that out of the way. This is the body of the reel. This is where half of the guts go. This is where all of the main essentials that are going to be seeing the most load go. And this gets anchored into this frame here by ridiculously oversized Torx bolts. That's pretty cool. So I'm assuming that allows them to either make machining on the assembly line easier, machine multiple parts on different CNCs. You can get more output. I'm not entirely sure, and I think, I'm not familiar with all the different sizes. I think this will somewhat allow same size stem, different size internals or body. I don't know, either way. But it's secured on there as it would be a one-piece frame. And this right here is one of the most overbuilt handle stems that I've ever come across. I mean, compare it to your Van Staal reels, compare it to some of the Z-Bass, it's on par, if not more beefed up and bolstered than some of the high-end $1,000 super spinners. And it's a machined aluminum part, not like what you'll find on the Stellas and the Celticas, which, as far as I'm concerned, is cast and then machined. Oh, here's the screw that went there. Sorry about that. All right, you got the side plate bearing that supports the left side of the main gear. Nice size, sturdy ball bearing. And if you look inside there, let's pop this out real. Can we pop it out? Same person that's machining the journal bearings out of the DuPont Vespel is the guy that makes this bearing pulling tool. Bearing bad. You can see that there's a heavy-duty seal located at the left-hand side entry point. And again, all of the main torque and load bearing components are housed in this heavy gauge machined aluminum frame. And if you look here, this portion here is where the clutch and the pinion and the flyer support, the rotor support, it's all machined into the reel. It's not a separate cartridge. The new Penn Torque uses a pair of screws to hold this to it, whereas the Penn Torque 1 had it part of the actual frame. We always like to see this. The old Stellas, I think the last one was the SWB, I think. The SWC has the hockey puck, the super stopper, on top of that secured by a couple screws, which was a massive change compared to the way they used to do it, where it was part of the actual frame. Brilliant. Now, we're also going to see later on in the video if I can show you how the support for the spool shaft itself at the base, where the oscillation slider is supported against the frame. It's one of the only true head scratchers of design, because with the Van Staal and the Z-Bass reels that Rob K designed, he had ball bearings supporting the base here. So if there's any twist and torque, that load was then put on actual very, very small ball bearings. In this design, it's, from all I can tell, metal on metal. There's no Delrin, there's no Teflon to help mitigate friction. We'll see over time how that lasts and how that load is supported. I haven't experienced any issues with any resistance under fishing in heavy current, whether it's a fish on the line or just a big GRS troller, it's just like a big metal lip or something that digs and has a lot of resistance and current. I haven't really had the experience that I'm fighting a handle as I'm fighting a lure. So far, I'm also not seeing any resistance or any wear. So moving along, this is excellent, by the way, absolutely excellent. Let's take a look at the spool. Titanium edge. I can't get this portion off. I don't have the proper spanner to get this off. Even if I did, I'd probably have to hit it with heat. And as such, I've tried to get this top piece out, which will reveal the top portion of the drag stack. So if you look here, this is the bottom portion. You have 3 carbon fiber washers. So you have multiple stainless steel eared washers. And then you have, I'm assuming, it's reciprocal up top. This cap here doesn't compress, it just stays seated, all right, because the drag knob, which is fully serviceable and very simply, so just 3 screws, you pull it out, boom, you're in there. You can adjust this, you can clean out the spring, clean out the threads, say if you have an accident where you drop it on the ground and you get sand up in the threads, you don't want to chowder up the spool shaft. This area stays stays put. And when you tighten up the drag knob, the easiest way to explain it is it pushes, or I should say, as you tighten up the drag knob, it pulls this bottom piece up and compresses the multiple drag washers. And you can see down here they machined the click plate, and now we'll get into that as well. So the spool click sounds wonderful. Sounds like a Z-Bass. Has that mechanical sound, that guttural, nice click. Not much of a ring like you get out of a Van Staal. There have been multiple issues where if you take the spool and you go like this, as this little click goes in and out of each one of the cogs, it will catch on the high spot and lock up the spool. That should be a simple fix. I had an issue with mine where out of the box there was no drag. It was just the faintest of clicks. You couldn't even hear it on the other side of the phone. And I caught a couple fish, and then all of a sudden it became audible again. And at the same time, I may have inadvertently and not realized it, that I had that same lockup issue when I was pulling out a snag. So I reeled up all the tension, and I started taking up the rest of the tension by hand cranking the spool. And as it goes in and out, it kind of went like this. And when I pulled out the snag, if you look closely, let's see if I can find it. Right there. You can see there's some damage there. That came from that spool click right here. That's stainless. This is aluminum. Stainless is going to win. Normally, it's going to win. And it definitely did some damage there. So this part, I'm probably going to have it replaced just because. And hopefully Rob comes out with a revision on how that spool click works. Because it's an issue. And it's not just isolated to one or two people. I've gotten DMs on Instagram from many guys out there that have claimed the same. So this is the drag cartridge with a big ball bearing at the bottom. There may even be one up at top. I can't really tell. Either way, excellent spool and drag support, accompanied by an extra beefy, what appears to be aluminum spool shaft. Now, moving along to what I consider the heart and soul of every spinning reel out there, especially when pertaining to surf spinning reels that need to have a high level of sealing. And this has always been the weak point. So your Penn Spin Fisher, your Penn Slammer, they have excellent sealing, although not as restrictive and as tight at the side handle entry points and at the main shaft. They have a weakness at the top of the anti-reverse clutch, and I'll show you how this goes about its business. So you have your main shaft that traverses the pinion seal, okay? It is very tight, right? If I did this with the Saragossa, if I did this with the Slammer, if I put any weight down here, it's just going to slide right out. This isn't budging. This is very, very tight. The seal here is in a complete other league than what you'd find in Slammer, Saragossa, Stella, Twin Power, Saltex. Any and all, much better sealing here. This is essentially a piston that goes up and down that when it goes inside, it can draw water in. Not the most crucial seal, as that belongs to the one above the clutch, but excellent job done here. I normally would want to see a friction mitigation bushing inserted here for the spool shaft to run on to keep the shaft centered and to lessen friction under load. It's not present here, but at the same time, the tolerance between the main shaft and this rotor retaining nut, so to speak, it's technically not. It's actually what compresses and keeps the clutch seal and the pinion almost as all as one unit, because this piece here is technically your rotor retaining nut because the rotor gets bolted to it with 3 screws. But if we go ahead and take a look, see if we can get this together. I'm going to press this in like this. That O-ring on this nut goes like this. Boom. That's going to protect water from getting through that area down into where the pinion rests. And you can see the two flats of the pinion get keyed to that. Make sense? You also have this part here. These two pieces, see how that? It's kind of snapped together? So the inside edge here is what runs on this heavy gauge, heavy duty seal here. That method of sealing, that mechanical physical barrier created by that lip seal running on that inside edge, is better than anything that's coming from a current pen spinning reel. So despite the IPX whatever rating that you'll find on a pen reel, this is far superior. It's also a heavier seal that's found in the Saltex, and it's equal to that found on the Availabiltiy reels that I've owned in the past and that I've seen in the VR. So right then and there, this puts it at the top of the class, or in that same top class as what you get in a Availabiltiy or a Z-Bass. All right. Now, if you go ahead, you have a bearing here. You have this little sleeve, right, that goes over the anti-reverse clutch sleeve that fits the ball bearing here. Then you have the clutch, and it all goes together like so, just like that. And then this threads down like so. And now you have essentially, oh, I left off the bearing. Sorry. There was another bearing, which is, it's kind of best that I left it out. So you had that top bearing here, you have this bearing here, and then you have the bearing that sits in this pocket here like so. And in all of the spinning reels that I've serviced and worked on and owned and monkeyed around with and tore apart, I have not yet come across a spinning reel that has 3 bearings supporting the pinion. It's always been 2. So in terms of stability of the pinion, it's excellent. It truly is. You have 3 bearings making sure that nothing at all in this entire assembly has any wiggle room at all. It's supported its entire length. And that brings me back to when I mentioned that there wasn't a friction mitigation washer here. Look how tight the tolerance is between the main shaft and the pinion. Can you see any movement? I mean, I'm trying to flex it on the other side. It's excellent. Rob K did a beautiful job when he designed this reel. And now I'm sitting here looking at it like, I really wish I didn't have that gap at the bottom of the clutch. I really want that bearing to be there. That's better. I feel better now. And as far as what it takes to get this part separated, I just used an adjustable wrench here and another wrench up top here, and it came apart simply. So this is the entire assembly. Boom. That's it. Brilliant. One of the best I've ever seen in any spinning reel, whether it's designed for the surf or not. And next up, that brings us to the main gear. Machined stainless steel. You can see how reinforced and chunky these teeth are. Time will tell how design holds up. Very deep and very wide cuts on the pinion, so there's a lot of metal to support whatever the gorilla on the other end of the handle is putting into this thing. This is a better way to go about it with the 2 dissimilar metals, because you have the harder going into the softer, which can wear it, but it also helps in a slight regard to getting rid of some of that geariness. This is not a geary reel. The gear design that you'll find in the Availabiltiy VR and the Availabiltiy VSX, you'll get some of that geariness just because of the, what is it, a hypoid gear. a little bit different than what you find in here. This is a traditional main gear and pinion combination that you'll find from the Stella all the way down to a $12, Chinese Availabiltiy Express reel. So excellent design here. When it comes to on the water performance and your user experience, it feels like it's a quality, feels good in hand. You don't have that coffee grinder sensation. So I just really want to see how this holds up long term in regards to how these two gears wear one another, and if over time, a season or two of hard use, if it starts going geary. Just curious. I think it'll hold up well. Next up we have the spool support. So you have this little pin. You see that there? And there's this little other O-ring. It just goes over the edge here. Keeps it from coming apart. Now, when the original Pen Torque first came out, the day it came out, my tackle shop, Effinger's now out of business, called me up and said, hey, we got it in. You want to tear it down? So I did a quick open and upskirt look. And there were a couple things that I noticed were like, why did they go about it that way? One of which was this specific support area for the spool, and it literally just flopped out. There's nothing keeping it in. The next revision under the Pen Torque one, they actually redesigned this area so you couldn't accidentally lose it. So when you put the spool on, if you didn't have it lined up perfectly, you had to go back and adjust it, make sure it was in there, the two pins were coming off, equally. And you had to be very careful that if you took the spool off, I'm assuming this is, the entire spool, it didn't just fall out and get lost. So no issue with that here. And now we move along to the oscillation system and the support for the spool and spool shaft. Now the oscillation on this is near perfect. I mean, this was fully hand cranked from empty. That's pretty damn good. That's pretty damn good. Now, a little tip, if you want to get the best line lay pattern with the least amount of gaps at the top and bottom, every 10 handle cranks, rotate the spool a quarter. Give another 10 cranks, rotate it again. That way, the oscillation pattern, which when it switches sides, it has to do so, and you don't want to have that repeat pattern because you will get some caving at the top of that stroke and at the bottom, depending on how the oscillation's balanced as far as it's up and down and the pattern it creates. So if you want to have pretty looking line lay, just give it a quarter turn every 10 handle cranks on any reel. That goes for a Shimano Stella, Saltiga, all the way down to a $20 reel. So the line lay on this is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best in the fully sealed reel business. It's equal or better to that of the Z-Bass and the Van Staal VSX, leaps and bounds better than the non-X Van Staals that had that hourglass line lay pattern. So yeah, that's excellent right there. The base of the spool shaft and the spool support, machined aluminum. It's not a cast piece, which you find on many reels, including some higher-end Iowas. And then you have this piece here. So let's take a look. We'll have that there seated loosely. Let's actually remove this first. Now you see that notch. That's the best way to describe it right there. That runs here. You see that? Come on, focus. Okay. That's going to run on that edge there. And then you have this piece. Not always easiest to do live. Okay. This is a spool support. So you have both sides supported to eliminate any of that twist. And then you have quite a bit more support on this side, again, to support the twist. That's what I'm curious about. Is this going to wear through over time? when the lubrication and the film that's left behind dissipates, will that, again, start wearing through the anodization and to the bare metal? And if so, how is that going to affect the performance of the reel long term? Because there's no polymer, there's no plastic, there's no Teflon, there's no nothing, just metal or anodized metal and anodized metal. So that's a long-term question mark. Is it going to cause the reel to fail? I don't think it could ever wear to the point that you would have a locked up reel or something that just feels crappy. I guess that's another scientific term, crappy. I don't see that being a long-term issue, because a lot of spinning reels that use your standard locomotion oscillation system, which is basically this and a cam, a lot of the support goes directly onto the face of this oscillation gear. So the twist, when it's sitting and mounted to the side plate, when there's twist, this cam here just runs against the face of the gear, which is what supports the spool shaft. So when you look at this as a whole, there's almost 3 different ways this is supported. Whereas some other reels will have one post here or a runner here, and then the rest of the load goes to, rubbing on the turning face of this oscillation gear. The original Saragossa, if you looked at it, had the bushing in the center, and you can see the elliptical wear pattern caused by the load of the oscillation support here. Figure I pointed out, it's not the end of the world. It's, again, one of those things that long-term, how's that going to hold up? Next up, we have, let's talk about this real quick. We have a bearing-supported oscillation drive gear that on its base has a Teflon washer that gets nestled into there and supported by a screw. And yeah, that's not taking too much of a load. If there's friction of the shaft going through the pinion, when there's resistance on the end of the line, that may cause a little bit more wear with the teeth of the main gear and its interaction here, because it's just harder to get the spool to lift and fall. I don't know if there's going to be any issues with that, to be quite honest with you. And again, long term, that's something you find out next year, late next year. Did you have an issue with it? And then you have the bearing that goes in here to support the opposite side of the main gear's axle. So again, 2 fairly beefy, very stout stainless steel ball bearings supporting both sides of the handle crank. Ambidextrous reel again. Left, right hand retrieve. Now we have something I want to touch on real quick, which is their maintenance/check port. So if you look here, this little slotted machined aluminum screw threads into the side plate here, which allows a few different things. If you shine a light in there, you can see if your grease is emulsified with salt water and is looking kind of like a different color. Vanstall uses a grease that changes color. So does Z-Bass. I think it turns red if it's been exposed to water. I could be wrong. I can't remember the color differences. I don't know if that the grease used in here is capable of that. I don't know. My reel has been fished underwater. About 2,100 yard casts worth. The retrieve was spent completely submerged, 6 to 12 inches down, just cranking the crap out of it. And when I tore it open, you saw there was nothing in there. I even saw some white powder that I took a taste of. I thought it might have been like dried salt. No, it was the remnants of the thread locker. So that was delicious. But then you have the remainder of the side plate here, which uses an O-ring gasket that when it's seated in here, it's pressed down. But the purpose of this is to be able to check on the condition of the lubricant to make sure there was no failure at the seals to allow salt water in. And at the same time, you can add grease. And because of the design, which has the tooth side of the gear facing this port, you can actually add lubricant to it in between major servicing. So midway through the season, if you feel like it, take a brush, dip it down in there. You can hit the teeth of the gear, give it a rotor turn, dip it down there, and boom, you got a completely refreshed For the most part, you know, is it going to make a huge difference because you didn't clean off the gear's face to reapply lubricant? Are you running the risk of getting grease on the main shaft where it traverses the pinion and causing that to become sluggish? Use it at your own risk. I probably won't. I'll just take the side plate off. And again, that's one of the reasons why they put it there, so you don't have to constantly be opening and closing it just to take a peek. The Z-Bass reel, it has that knurled thumb screw. Allows you to remove the whole side plate to get this kind of view. If you want to do that, just use the torque spits, pop out these two screws, and you're looking at the reel just like you would a Z-Bass. The only issue with the Z-Bass was, I don't want to call it an issue because I don't know how many people had developed problems because they didn't secure it tight enough. If you took that side plate off and you only used your pointer finger and your thumb to tighten it up, you may not have gotten it tight enough. You know, best bet was take like a leather belt, grip it, and then really crank it down. This, it's more traditional. It's not as convenient, but you have the tools available to you. You can get inside and then pop the side plate on securely, and you know it's secure. All right. So that's out of the way. Now, the line roller. This is another area of the reel that if I put my reel designer cap on and decided to design a line roller support setup, I would have done one thing different, which would have involved 2 more parts and a redesign of this to make it wide enough to accommodate it. So let's do a rundown here. So let's pop this bearing into this line roller. All right, so you got one ball bearing supporting the line roller. Not the end of the world. Tons of companies do it. The only issue is when you have a load on it, if it's not always in the same spot. So when you're retrieving a reel, the line's going to favor the one side. So it's going to put most of the stress is going to go on the one side and try to put a side load on it. So when you're pushing on just this one side, it's going to cause it to lean. Putting a ball bearing here, followed by a spacer and another one on the opposite side, would distribute that load evenly. You won't have this type of effect that could cause a premature wear on the ball bearing there. Other than that, I have no problems with how it's going about its business over there. You have 2 individual seals, one on this side, the other goes on the other side. They get the outside edge is designed to fit in a groove on the actual roller itself, and that runs on this piece here, which we'll call the axle. So those rubber seals are running on the anodized surface here, which is brilliantly machined, very smooth, doesn't need a stainless steel sleeve of sorts because of how well it's done there, because you're not going to have any inconsistencies or any rough spots to wear those seals. And then you have this little cap here, which kind of keeps it centered against the inside of that bearing. And then you have this little Teflon washer here that makes sure that the line roller itself doesn't grind against anything in there. Good. I like it. I dig it. And then you have the bail wire. This, my friends, best in the business. Absolute best. Also acts as a large part of the counterbalance too. That goes into there like so. This heavy steel here, screws into there, along with to the actual bare wire itself. Acts as more weight into there as well. And my friends, you have the sturdiest bail wire in the industry. Nobody else does it better. It's solid. It's super thick, super heavy gauge. You got to fall on that pretty hard in the right way to cause it to damage itself or break. And then you have how the bail opens and closes. Now, a lot of guys had looked at this and questioned whether or not it's going to hold up over time. A lot of guys have shown concerns that the piston bail is going to collect sand and bind. So let's go ahead and we'll take a quick look. It's easy enough to get into. And we'll go into this side. I've only been on the side of the line roller. Again, excellent fasteners used in this reel. I'm going to go ahead and gently push this out. Nice. Oh, that was funny. That was close. That was close. That was really close. So you have this little pin. See how this goes? What is going on with my autofocus here tonight? That pin runs in here. This little machined aluminum portion runs in this hole here. The only place in this entire reel they use a nylon or a Delrin or friction mitigation plastic is in the bail assembly, which is cool. I wish they used it maybe another spot or two, but it's not the end of the world. Not that we can tell as of yet. Then you have the female end of it. And then you have the lower portion, which is almost like a ball joint. See that there? Then you have the spring. Good quality spring. This appears to all be good quality stainless steel. This ball joint here, I don't think you're going to have problems with sand getting up in there. I really don't. There is a drain port here that should allow for contaminants to get up in there. They shouldn't really get anywhere though. So I think that's good there. I haven't experienced an issue yet, but I haven't fished it hard in sandy wash and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the actual, he calls it telescoping. I agree with it. It's not a piston. It's not sealed. There's a little bit of a gap. So it's tight enough that large sand grains aren't going to get up in there. Only the tiny stuff is. But it's stainless. And you can probably wrench out anything and crush any of those sand grains should it actually start binding up, and then flush it with water. And you saw how easy it was to get to. It's just as easy to get back together, and I'm going to prove myself wrong and make myself look like a complete idiot by putting it together on camera and dropping it on the floor in the process. So we're already well on our way to looking like a fool. So we're going to put the spring back in that end. We're going to put this over top. I'm going to go here. My hands are super greasy. Oh, this is going to get scary in a minute. Okay. Hopefully, I don't even know if we were in frame there. This is not easy to do when you're looking through a viewfinder. Okay. Boom, like so. My hands are super greasy. Boom, done. That wasn't too bad. Looks good to me. Right? Or is it back? No, it's right. Cool. And now we're going to go ahead and just to show you guys. And then we just finish that up and thread it on the other rest of the way. So yeah, that's essentially all there is to it. The only thing I'll show you is this non-handle side cap threads on like that. So there you have it. In my impression, and in my opinion, one of the most impressive reels to hit the market in a long time. despite some of the quality control, some of the assembly issues, which somebody pointed out that quality control is part of assembly and vice versa. So from what it appears, Rob K chimed in on the thread I started on Starpers Online, where I did an initial write-up going over some of the issues I found, and then I posted the video there. He chimed in on that thread saying that the majority of the manufacturing is going to be coming back to the United States. Some of the critical parts are assembled in Connecticut, and yeah, I've seen some crazy things. The screws that are embedded in the handle are in sideways like this. I'll post up some pictures. I've seen the screws here in, sideways there. We have some issues here at the drag click. Some quality issues allowing defective ball bearings to get put into reels and leave the factory, with grinding ball bearings. I'm assuming that once the final check makes its way to the United States, he claimed that some of it is being done here in the States already, with the goal being having much more of that in the future. I'm hoping that stuff like that won't make it out to the wild. This reel is brand new to the market. I would have watched every specimen that made its way out to the wild like a hawk to make sure that everything is perfect. Mine wasn't. But even still, if you're asking me, which I've already been asked at least 100 times, Scooby, Nick, Tackle Advisors, what reel should I buy? Vanstall VR, Vanstall VSX, Z-Bass, Saltex, or this. And I've seen guys, in the comment section, I'm fine with my Saltex, yada, yada, yada. There's been some issues with those reels too. The guys that have ones that perform well, awesome, great. Fish the hell out of it until it dies. I recommend this reel over the Vanstall, knowing that there's some potential issues, mainly because I like being an early adopter. I don't have issues with that. Do I like seeing defects and stuff show up in reels that I buy? I've come across it so many times, guys. I don't know anybody else on the planet that has received more defective goods as a tackle reviewer. Even companies that send me crap, they'll send me defective items. Like, I'm putting this out to a pretty large audience. You might want to make sure that you got a product that's not a piece of shit before it makes its way to me, because I'm showing you guys regardless. And I like what I see enough in this reel that I'm willing to forgive some of the faults that have made its way down the chain, because I don't see them being there in the upcoming months. Do I like the fact that they were shown in their initial product launch reels? Hell no. I'd be embarrassed. There's 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that all have experienced similar things, minor things, albeit that the spool click is a minor thing. You can have that happen. If you have that happen when a fish is taking line and it locks up on you, that's a major problem. I remember with the earlier Gen 2 Z-Bass reels, having the sand that would accumulate underneath the drag knob caused it to automatically tighten as the fish was taking out line. I lost a couple fish on that. Rob K came out with a redesigned spool and drag knob to remedy that. I had to pay I think I paid cost for it because I fought back and forth with him. I was like, I don't want to spend $400 to fix this. I think I paid $140. But unfortunately, they had to readjust the shimming inside the reel to accommodate the new spool design, which the bonus of having, hey, I got 2 spools, went out the window when I tried using my old spool when I was in Montauk, just because I had lighter braid on it. And I couldn't because the shimming internally at the base of the shaft that lowered the spool caused it to have a peak or a big gap at the top. And that, my friends, was the last time I threw a wind knot, because I didn't know that. I was using 55-pound Daiwa boat braid, that multicolored crap. And I threw, wind knots 20 to 30% of my casts. The only time I've thrown wind knots since then was on a $6 spinning reel. I'm still going to put that video out at some point. It was pretty funny. I went through an entire spool of braid. That reel was spooled from the base on up with braid, and by the end of the fishing trip, there was virtually 10 or 15 yards left. Little freshwater $6 spinning reel. And so he addressed the issue. I thought I got a bonus. It turned up not to be. That issue is no longer present in the current Z-Bass reels, from what I understand. So Rob K is actively watching everything that's being discussed on the forums, as is his team. He's responsive on the forum. He's aware of everything that's been going on. And this, or I should say, issues showing up at the initial launch of some of his products, I don't want to say are common, but it's happened. He's come out with quite a few different reels, from the Subaqua, that's the VR, and the Blue Marlin, and Z-Bass, and Van Staal, and now VISSER. Early inceptions of some of his products did have some of these. So I would have liked to see, like, we're going to get this 100%, not a single fault at launch. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Is the other world, because a lot of the stuff I'm finding aren't design issues. They're more or less, Rob K and VISSER, they're not making these ball bearings. Nobody puts good quality ball bearings in handle knobs. Not even companies that their only thing that they do is make handle knobs. Like these bearings here are the same exact quality, maybe from the same factory that Gomexis uses in theirs. And I've bought sleeves of 10 Traxxas ball bearings that have little seals on them, or whatever. It's $10 for a 10-pack. Usually 2 of them are dead out of the box. I would have liked to see something better there and there in terms of a quality ball bearing. Daiwa seems to use some very good miniature ball bearings in their higher end reels. Their low end reels don't get them, but the higher end reels do. You can tell just by looking at the shield. They're like a totally different color. They're from a different factory. They might be Namibia micros. I don't know. But yeah, moving forward, I wish them well. I have no problems recommending this reel to somebody, as long as they know that there is the potential to have a couple issues. And I'm confident that those issues will be supported by the company. Yeah. So if you're planning on a trip and you need a sealed reel to go to block, if you need a sealed reel to go swim out to some rocks in Montauk, and that trip is in a week, I'm going to say buy Van Staal. If you're buying a reel in the off season to get ready to use, next spring, that kind of deal, I will 100% say go out and buy this VISSER, because anything that you come across as far as an issue, you'll find out when you got it at home. It's that simple. And I'm assuming at some point the spool click will be addressed, that issue with that binding, and he'll have a part that he can send you that you can just pop in. Boom, done. So it's with all that being said, if you guys enjoyed this, it's been a while since I really went thoroughly through a reel such as this, and part of what made me enjoy this the most was it's a completely different design. The way that the internals house the main gear and the pinion are unique in the industry. I like the fact there are more than 2 ball bearings supporting the pinion. I remember when I questioned that on the Slammer, and the engineers at Penn got back to me, and they said it's a machining. When you have to align 3 bores, you have to be very, very precise. And I understand that. The way you went about it here does in a way subvert that, because you have the open side that has to allow for this to go on. So there has to be some type of tolerance machined into that to allow it to kind of slip past, and then it will support it. So it's not truly supported at 3 locations, but it's close enough to me. And with that being said, I dig it. And come up with a different handle knob, please. And I've been in contacts with Gomexis to see if they can get something going. I've tried using their knobs and all that kind of stuff, and different combinations of shims and all that kind of assembly order, and I can't get it to fit here. So they're gonna have to come out with something specific to allow a swap. Whether they're gonna do it, I doubt it, because there's just not enough of these reels in the market. If they sell 1,000 reels in 2021, is that going to be worth Gomexis machining something specific for this, or making a run? I don't know. That's going to be up to them. But yeah, until next time, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This was fun. And if you own a VISSER, let me know down below how you liked it. If you own a Saltex, let me know how you like it. If you own a Van Staal VR, let me know how. I know there's good and bad with the VRs. If you own a VSX, let me know. Van Staal VSXs have been one of the most bulletproof, tried and true reels out there. And if you own a Z-Bass, I'm a former Z-Bass owner. I had 2 of them, the ZX25s, beautiful reels, amazing reels. Had some issues with the sand spool and You know, I pulled out a drag using 80-pound braid, and I dented the race where the ball bearing supported the spool because it's stainless against aluminum, and it was, oh god, that was one of the hardest snags I've ever pulled out. And I didn't have a tool to pull out the snag, so I had to pull it by the spool. But yeah, my first tuna was caught on a Z-bass, and it fell apart. And yeah, the fasteners for the reel, like the screws for the rotor, all loosened up. So make sure when you get these reels, make sure these screws are very tight. You don't want these to loosen up on you, like mine did. And the screws that held the stem to the frame on the Z-Bass loosened up. So it was literally falling apart as I was fighting this fish. I had to take the spool off and take a Leatherman and retighten the fasteners. So it was a 130-pound bluefin tuna, my first ever tuna, on a jig. And yeah, and again, that was years and years and years and years ago. That was a reel that was, I believe, before the current owner, Ron, took over at Z-Bass. So not a knock against what's out there currently at all whatsoever. I want to make that abundantly clear. That was an old thing. And I think maybe only one or two people ever had that issue. And it's not like it was with the main gear in the original Saragossa FAs, where the screws that held the machined aluminum or forged aluminum main gear to its axle, there used to be like a ring of like 5 screws or 6 screws. And those screws would loosen up. So you had an axle that was floating and the main gear that was just wallering. And you would get, like, you'd be fishing. All of a sudden you got a ton of gear lash. And it wasn't the interaction between the pinion and main gear teeth. It was the actual axle moving within the bore of the main gear. And yeah, I pointed that out. And Shimano rectified that by thread locking the crap out of all their 2-piece main gears that were secured by screws from that point forward. Yeah, that was pretty funny. So with all that being said, guys, tight lines. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon.